Hi everybody. Um, Sorry. I just tried some exercises that clearly my foot still couldn't do. Just landing on the left one is still slightly painful, trying to go away from me. So sorry. I wanted to demonstrate some easy things to deal with the mobility and things, but my mobility is not there yet. Anyway, so as promised, today is week 2. We're concentrating more on the cuts and sizes again, right? So, and it's always good to have basically your usual. It's almost like the regular exercise. You have your leg day, you have your arms day and stuff. So if you had heavy exercise on Monday, like we did yesterday, today is a little bit easier, just more on the technique side versus the just building up the muscles. So as we always do, warm up and then do your usual first week, 20 cuts, 20 strikes, and we wait to go. It gives you enough to bumps up your blood flow in the muscles. Maybe tiny. As you see in here. Anyway, so the cuts and the strikes. In order to do them right, first your grip has to be correct. So the usual warning, right? Never hold it like this. Doesn't give you enough leverage and looks funky. So either your pinky goes on the bottom, or you just hold it straight, but you'd never do just, the empty cuts. The upper hand is always under the suba. It never actually truly grips the blade, elbow handle. Doesn't grip the blade. Doesn't doesn't grab the handle all the way. You rarely do this. I mean, well, you do, but in reality, most of the control is right here. Remember, when you do the rotations, right, this is how you save yourself from doing a whole bunch of injuries to your wrist, or trying to work out how to do this. You just do it like this. So that's why important thing is to kind of work out the old wrists. So assuming we have the proper grip, typical fine things. Your typical strike is, assuming that you will be going all the way through, right? You start somewhere behind yourself and you end up like this. Notice that I never do this, I never do this. My hands are always actually rotating around it's almost the rotation around the elbow and you smoothing it through the shoulder. It's almost a round kind of movement. Probably see this inside. Yeah, so you can see it like this, right? It's a roundish movement. The reason why it's roundish movement is because you can shorten the distance and turn your strike in a cut, or a slice, depending what you need to do. But if you build up this round movements, you can do either one. If you do this, well, first of all, this you never want to be straight because, well, if it getting caught, God forbid, or if somebody just, well, somebody hit you, right? So first of all, we have the extra distance if you need, and secondly, like I said, if you getting caught on this, hit on the elbow, it's extremely painful, potentially dangerous because it damages the whole bunch in there, and right. So this is the round movement. So notice it's a round. It doesn't matter how you do it, 2 hands, 1 hand, whichever way starting it, it's always very rounded movement. It's almost like you're trying to draw around yourself. At the end, with the one hand it's very simple, right? You just kind of go down and it stops there. With the 2 hands it's a bit difficult because depending on the grip that you have, you end up with either this or this. But notice that it's never this. Never ever you have this stance that is super funky, super dangerous, and it actually ends up, doesn't matter how strong your fingers are, you will lose it. With 2 hands you always just kind of drag it. And if you want to add the extra strength in there, you do this kind of, like I said before, it's almost the same as when you did your washing, right, and trying to draw the last bits of water from your washing. You kind of squeeze it out, squeeze it out. That squeezing movement is what you want at the end. You don't want it to be super squeezy because then, well, you get stuck every time, but you want it to be there because it helps you to control and it also adds the extra stability. So this is exactly the same. The diagonal ones are exactly the same. There is not much of difference. The difference is only in the way how you apply your blade, right? It goes straight or diagonal. You don't really want to do the wide ones. Yeah, you want to train yourself to go straight on exhale so you control it better. And you want it to be in diagonal of your frame. And kind of pay attention how it goes. If you start making it too fast or too slow, well, too slow you will not hear the whoosh. Too fast you will hear the whoosh, but you will start noticing yourself doing this, especially at the beginning when you're not controlling booking very well, because there is enough inertia that just drives you through. And you quite often see that in the demonstration videos that people are putting together with the metal weapons when they just want to show off a little bit, right? You can see the guy doing, and what you will notice is in the footwork especially, typically those people will go this. You want to be grounded. You don't want your blade to lead you. You're the one in control. You don't want to be like this. You don't want to be short, but you also don't want to be too far out. You always have to be balanced. Your typical balance is, I mean, you're doing, 30, 70, 50, 50, stuff like that. You never do the full 100 unless you're actually moving all the way through. The other thing is that, like I say, if you start building yourself and building your techniques on the steps, which is helpful to control and helpful to memorize the movements. But remember that your steps should not be truly controlling the piece at which you hit. If you start doing that, if you're going in the real spinning, you won't be able to break the rhythm, and your opponent will easily guess when what happened. It's not as much as a problem if you're doing a stage fight. Sorry, allergies just killing me. I know I'm touching my face all the time, but Texas in the spring. It's not as much a problem to break the rhythm, so to speak, when you do the... Seriously? Oh, this bird that's trying to warn everybody out. But even then, if you do your staged fight, it becomes harder to figure out the pace of the fight or making the strange. So, example, right? So you know that you need to do the 1, 2, 3, right? If you keep doing this at the same rhythm, same pace, you always do this. But if you start to be able to control your rhythm, you can do 1, 2, 3. Right? You can break it down and it becomes easier. So anyway, progression through the strikes. So these are basic 3. As long as you master these 3, as long as you become comfortable with them, it actually is very easy to learn all the rest, because realistically there's only so many ways you can swing this, right? I mean, there's certain range of movements and that's it, and it doesn't really matter how fanciful we call things. Like, just, you know, there's only so many ways you can hit somebody with the stick or with the blade. So as you've done those, you might realize that they are also, if you start, especially if you start dropping them down, right? If you're going all the way through, you notice that they are kind of tend to go out a little bit. So what you actually in fact executing is, this is a strike, absolutely. But when you're doing this, you actually executing the lower block. It is the lower block with a strike is executed against the uppercut. You want to stop the blade, and that's why you're just doing it like this, right? So we just magically learn not only how to strike, but also how to block. There is difference. You want to strike, you're starting to work with your distance. As you're striking with the last third of the blade. The reason is because that's where the most inertia is, right? And this is the biggest, kind of the fastest moving part of it. The slowest moving part of the blade is this, the last third. The last third is what you use to block. So you can think about this striking portion, whatever the hell portion, because you will end up using the middle a lot as well. It's just kind of, it's easier to think about this portion as the less, it's not less useful, but it's less technically right. And this is the strongest part of the blade. The reason being, it becomes harder, and it's not only harder portion here because, you know, in a normal sword you have the full tante going here and you hold it, your hands here. So closer to your hands, more power you actually have to stop. More power you have to hit, more power you have to stop. So your lower ones, typically you want to block is this portion. And same is true for the other direction, right? So we've just done the hit and a block. The hit and a block. And this one is basically just a hit, because you can't block anything that goes straight at you unless you're trying to move down somebody's blade. And sometimes you do, sometimes you work in the blade, but typically, and this is the mistake that most of people do when they come into fencing. People work in the blade, not on the opponent. They work in the blade, and you can see it in the demos, and sometimes you see it in the very cool videos when the guys, you know, do the full swings and jump at each other and do this magic stuff, right? And all of a sudden you notice that the hit is right here, and all they do is just kind of wave it in the air. And you go, well, that was great, except it wouldn't ever reach. So if you're the person with extremely good sense of distance, you just kind of avoid it by just stepping away from it a little bit. So you always want to make sure that when you hit, and you notice it when I did small demos with Lana, and I will do them again when our work pace is a little bit easier. I always end up training with a step forward a little bit. And that's the reason why. It's because I'm trying to shorten the distance. And don't just stand there and do this. And you don't want to do it either. You want to start shortening, lengthening distance as you go. So you shorten it on a strike typically, and you're typically trying to lengthen it on the block. Or, well, sometimes not, but, you know, makes general sense, right? Somebody trying to hit you, you're trying to kind of walk away a little bit. Break the distance and come with the counter attack. I wanna. So, striking the block, striking the block. Then there is the horizontal ones. And the horizontal ones are typically go, especially if you're doing the Sword XP system, right? They go basically neck and torso somewhere around here. And it's easier to always imagine that you're working with somebody of your size because you can throw yourself better in general, right? But then you can be smaller than your opponent, right? You can, and sometimes the difference is staggering. So you need to be able to realize that there is also these guys, you know, kind of the in terms of the fantasy, right? We have the dwarven warfare, and if you think about it, right, when the dwarves fighting the giants, they never actually go in for the head. There is no reason they wouldn't reach anyway, or if they reach, then it's kind of too far. You go there somewhere, and I mean, I had fought the guys that are way taller than me, and I'm not the smallest guy out there either. So, you know, you realize at some moment that there's always somebody who's bigger than you, and there's always somebody smaller. Anyway, when you're trying to work against an opponent who's bigger than you, there is no reason to do this all that much, because all it does is just kind of showing that you don't know where to hit. You're always trying, for the bigger opponents, you're just trying to cut them down. So that's why learning how to do the horizontal strikes is actually very beneficial, because at some moment you realize if somebody is bigger than you, then your top hit that normally would go over your head, you just go in their torso, and the lower cuts are always going into the legs. And that's how dwarves fight in giants. They cutting down the legs and then they go for the head. Right? So just remember that. So horizontal ones. The horizontal ones are, the reason why they're tricky is because people, again, this balance is sideways, right? And there's always the problem with the people who coming from the non-bladed training. Because remember, we have, especially with the bookends, we have the one side that is cutting, and this one is kind of dull, right? I mean, if you coming from the two-sided bladed versions, then you can do this, but it's weird. You always kind of have the striking port. So when you strike, you have to make sure that you're striking with the cutting edge. And that's why when you're switching sides, you will notice that your hands are kind of, so you cut in this way, this one is lower, this one is higher, you cut in this way, it's the other way around. But sometimes it becomes very uncomfortable because or you can go straight for the belly. Sometimes it becomes very uncomfortable because your hands are kind of getting all tied up. So you need to make sure that if you're starting to feel this uncomfortable or it's starting to go this way, your front arm is what defines this portion of the movement. So all of a sudden, it actually will start make much more sense because your blade in the end range of movement is typically pressed almost against the forearm, right? So this, and you never do the, well, I mean, you never do this. Kind of notice that when you do this, cuts in the horizontal, you sort of have almost, it's not entirely fixed position, but the backhand is always kind of have the shorter range of motion than the front one. The front one is what leads it and defines the range. This one is the supporting one, and the reason why it's there is because if somebody hit it or block it, right, you have enough power here to either stop or overpower the block. And that's another thing, when you're working with the opponents, when you're working with the partners, if you're working for the camera, for the, be it movie, be it photo, when you block, there's the moment that everybody goes through when they block and they go for the next motion. You never just stop it. You never drop the block. You should never drop the block until you make sure that your partner, opponent, whatever, actually released it. Because if you have a giant wasp in there, and you just saw it, put it off. Because if you blocked and then dropped the blade, it can go through, and there is no point. Right, so anyway, so the horizontal ones. So these ones are trickier. The ones with the underarm are easier because you can kind of see the better way how it's all done, right? And in the end of the day, if you've done enough of the vertical or diagonal ones, you will notice that the position of the arm is very much same as for the horizontal. So you done that, right? And your arms never break. Or you done that, and your arms never break. So, and as I said before, once you start feeling fancy, you can start doing the cuts. The difference between the cuts and hits, right, is the range at which they work. So this one is the cutting one, this one is the hitting one. So strike, cuts, slice. Slightly different variations. So that's actually about it as far as the technique for the regular strikes. And these ones also, you rarely see the horizontal ones as the block. The reason being is because if the horizontal blade goes, right, it can only block in this direction. If you do the diagonal ones, right, it covers sides better. The horizontal one, somebody dodges under, typically, and you can see it in a whole bunch of movies, in a whole bunch of the training videos, right? Just slice, and actually even in some choreography that if you've been to the sword XP, right, you remember those. Somebody does that, and sidestep, and you do the fancy movement, and everybody dies. If you're starting to play around, by the way, with those, right, under the cut, always remember that ideally you go on the other side. So if it comes from here, right, you never dodge this way. You dodge this way. And I mean, once you do a few times and once you hit it on the head, you know, it becomes second nature, but we're still all forgetting that. Whenever you go from the swipe, you go from other side, not from the same side. But it's just more for the, you know, if you have somebody to play with, if you have somebody to train with, use this opportunity to, well, not hit them on the head. So the horizontal ones, you typically have, like I said, two. The reason why you normally not go for the legs is because, let's see, is there enough? Yes, there is enough. So the horizontal ones for the corpus or for the head, easy. If you go for the fit, if it's somebody your height or smaller, you will notice you will have to do this, right? And it's bad for many reasons. Well, first of all, you're doing the bendy thing, which is not very good for you, and you're back on the tire. Secondly, because actually hitting the legs of somebody who's moving and who's smaller than you or same height as you is actually not as easy, because, you know, all it takes is just to move over the foot and you kind of end up standing there like the big giant wobble, and they just hit you in the head. I have a friend who used this a lot. In his younger days, he would normally just stand, and when somebody goes for the edge, he would just do hit. I don't know if I managed to capture this, but trust me, it was very embarrassing. You just stay there and you just get the hit. And that is pretty much all that is there for the diagonal ones. The only ones that I didn't touch are the uppercuts. And the uppercuts are the funky ones, because normally, in all honesty, unless you're trying to demonstrate the techniques, unless you're fighting with a whole bunch of opponents, in the typical sword fight doing those guys is, I mean, I never seen people using them in the reels, because they're slow and they're quite predictable, and when they do them, right, you're opening yourself. There's a bunch of dogs walking around. So typically, if you do the swiping ones, you do them for the few reasons. You do them to either join them with something else, right? Basically gain the inertia and momentum to speed up yourself, or to just show off. Or sometimes you do them to stop the cats from higher levels. But it's very rare, because typically it's easier to just step aside. But, you know, like I said, sometimes you want to be fancy and you just do them. So, and they are generally very easy to do. They are, you have your straight sword, well, straight pose, straight sword. And you just kind of slide the blade out. It's almost like if you're trying to cut somebody in this direction. So you do the swiping motion, you swipe everything in this direction, and then notice the edge of the blade, you just go up. And the same is true for the other side. You stand here, you do this, you do the swipe, and you do this. It is not the movements that is for some people easier to grasp, because kind of why I'm doing this, right? Because there is it feels the weird way to do the whole range of the motion here. And like I say, the reason why you do this, if you're trying to fight or stage the fight against multiple opponents, this is your protection from the people who are coming from these zones. And other thing is that as you starting to make them faster, you will notice that it also helps you to gain extra momentum. So if you're working with the super heavy sword, with the giant two-handers, with the heavy bastards, with the can't remember the name of the what's that fancy katana-like weapon that is actually much longer. Getting old, horrible. As will help you to manipulate those weapons. And just always remember that there is actually the cutting edge. So just, yes, they are dull weapons, but and notice that the frame of this movement is quite close to my body. Even if I don't rotate all around myself, I know, because I've done them so many times, where all this stuff goes. And what you will also notice with the uppercuts is that your arms will start going much more wobbly. So you need to make sure that you engaging a little bit of your shoulders and a little bit of your forearms to compensate for the fact that now you have all this extra play in the hands. And if you do it, they become, well, less awkward. Let's put it this way. Because you don't fall down and then you know where it goes, right? But notice that as I do this, there is the moment when I have poses like this. And that's why you don't like them, because interesting enough, it's actually one of the stances. You can use it. It's the weird one, but you can use it. And yes, speaking of the stances, your typical, so if you're trying to follow the Kendo, Kendo and Bushido and all this stuff, right? So there are a few stances that generally recommended for the beginners, and as well as for regular practitioners. So you have your regular middle one, right, which is your basic balance stance. You have your concentrating low spirit, lower one, is about head away, actually maybe knee away from the ground, and you have your tall one, it's ready to attack, heading away from opponent, right? You can see that you could not actually observe the end of the blade. It looks like it's all in the projection, but it's right there, right? So it's heading. And you can use either one if you feel like it. This one is typically kind of nice to start from when you do the cuts. This one is nice when you're trying to catch the breath and trying to, if you're working with the partner and you guys going freestyling, for example, right? This one is good indicator, give me the pose without actually using the verbiage, or it could be one where you can just change it in the middle if you're getting attacked right away, but it gives you muscles a little bit of rest, give yourself space to breathe. It's harder to defend from those and from those. You have to control your distances better, but it's there if you need it. And these ones, the lower ones are actually quite nice if you're trying to work on the round slices, because you can do this more naturally. Whereas, like I said, these are just kind of very good for controlling the uppercuts, oh, sorry, not uppercuts, the upper strikes, diagonals. They're all useful in a way. So we went through verticals, diagonals, horizontals, uppercuts. The things that we haven't touched yet are the thrusts, right, and what to do with the legs. So it's getting hot in here. So we'll work on them later. Thank everybody for watching. The next video I will actually probably talk about about the preparations more, and how to get ready for them, handling the swords and stuff. So basically the mental games, if you like. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe out there and good luck.